And it looks like we are live. Give me just a second, guys, so that I can pull in our Mile High Huddle Facebook groups to get everybody here in our wonderful community live and with us and rolling. Just give me a second for some green check marks. And welcome in, guys, to another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, Mile High, hello. First things first. How are we doing, man? We've got training camp right around the corner. Things are starting to ramp up in the NFL. I mean, there's lots of news coming out. We've got the Kyler Murray extension that just happened yesterday that we can kind of break down a little bit, talk about how that can go into Russell Wilson and his deal here soon. Players going on the physically unable to perform list and stuff like that. Like the Broncos news is definitely coming right around the corner. Training camp opens up next Wednesday. Dude, are you excited? How you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm surprised you didn't mention the biggest news for the Broncos that's actually come out. August 9th. That's the date for the ownership change to be, all done and everything like that. Which is big news. It's going to lead for a very exciting training camp that opens up here, I believe, just next week.
Yep, next Wednesday.
Yeah. So it's a good time. And as for me, I'm doing great. It's finally stopped raining. It rained here for like 2 weeks straight, which was really annoying. But it's nice, it's sunny out, which is good for all the dip netters because dip netting's going on. But from what I hear, it's been a slow time on the river, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here talking Broncos football as we start diving into training camp in the time of the lack for a better term, the dead air time of where we're trying to struggle for conversation topics a little bit is soon to be over, which is always great to have.
Yeah, it's amazing to be able to actually talk some real Broncos news, real football news in general. I kind of have an idea up my sleeve. I'm going to hold off on that. And Erick, I want to talk to you privately about that just a little bit with in regards to Saturdays and stuff like that. But yeah, the NFL is starting to come back, full ramp up and everything. We've got obviously training camp news. The dead season's over. The seasons of the lists, the top fives, the Mount Rushmores and stuff like that, finally winding down. We're going to get into some actual news and stuff. And honestly, this is really the last part of what we, kind of have to do as far as the dead season, projecting how this Broncos team is going to shape up here in 2023. So today we're going to get into the quarterbacks, the running backs, and then the special teams units, kicker, punter, stuff like that. Little bit of conversation there, but mainly the focus today, quarterbacks, running backs, all of your guys' questions. So guys, please get your super chats in. Please get your stars donations in on Facebook. Any questions you guys have about this roster, we're going to dive into that a little bit. We'll go long form more into wide receivers and tight ends probably next week, and maybe a little bit of the offensive line. The week after that, we'll go with the defensive front seven, round things out with the secondary the week after that, and just kind of break down all the news and notes and whatnot on how Erick and I perceive this Broncos 53-man roster is going to kind of shape up. But before we get into that, guys, want to say hello to everybody here in the chat. We've got Greg Smith saying hello over on Facebook. Good evening, Broncos country. Kathy Lund waving hello. Dylan Von Arch doing his things back behind the scenes, helping us moderate the chat and whatnot. Hello, everybody. K-Hop in the house as well. Is Montreal Washington the gunner? I don't know about gunner, but probably a return guy. We'll talk about him probably here in just a little bit when we get to the specialists and stuff like that, because I think that there's a fun conversation with Montreal Washington with Mike Boone and also with like a guy like KJ Hamler or maybe even a cornerback that we can maybe bring up as a name to potentially turn as a punt returner and kick returner. So we'll dump into that here in just a minute. Hi, Kaven. You need to go outside. Go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Guys, make sure you get at us on Twitter by following me at Sanderson MHH, and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also for Scott, running the ones and twos behind the scenes at Scout Kennedy. Also, guys, while you're at it, make sure you're following at DVDD_pod. That is our podcast account. You find out what we're talking about every single Friday. And also the big one, guys, the mother account. It's Mile High Huddle, where you guys are going to find breaking news and analysis regarding everything concerning your Denver Broncos. Breaking news, analysis. You'll have pretty much anything regarding the Broncos. You're going to be able to find that at Mile High Huddle on Twitter. Facebook supporters, go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod and get on that. Communicate with everybody else here and our wonderful Mile High Huddle community. Great conversations go on over there every single day. Now, Erick, because I still got a rugrat crawling around in my room, and I'm going to have to mute my microphone so I can get him out of here. First things first, Gary Leeds Palmer jumping in here with a generous Stars donation. Gary's a great friend of ours on Facebook. Hey, Lance, Erick, and Scott. Lots of good news to talk about. Let's go Broncos, and let's ride. Yes, sir, Gary. It's always great to see your wonderful face here in the chat with us. Now, Erick, I want to kind of guide this discussion for you just a second so I can mute and get Caven out of here. And I do apologize for this, guys. But obviously, the quarterback conversation's done. We know kind of exactly how it's going to shape out, at least at the starter position. We don't have a quarterback controversy. It's going to be Russell Wilson. There's no doubt about that. I think that his spot is probably the most secure on this roster. Let's dive into this quarterback conversation, though, because I think the backup quarterback conversation actually has a very interesting kind of twist to it. So I'll let you take it away from here.
Well, I mean, it's great, as mentioned, is that we don't have to really focus or talk about the starting quarterback position. There's no battle going into it. It's Russell Wilson's job. That is great to see, great to have. Nothing to worry about in there. But it does go back to the backup quarterback job. And unfortunately, we do find ourselves having to talk about that, as much as I don't like talking about the quarterback position. Anyways, for me, when we're projecting a 53-man roster, which is kind of what we're doing here, the question always comes down to is how much do you really need that third quarterback? And part of that is Russell Wilson. I mean, he's played in 158 games in his career so far out of 161 possible. I don't see a need for that third quarterback. I don't think there is. The question is just who is that second one? Is it Josh Johnson or is it Brett Rippon? I would think that no matter what, whichever one doesn't win that backup job probably has a good shot if they don't get claimed off waivers to be on the practice squad. Josh Johnson is eligible because of the changes with the rules for the practice squad.
I'm with you on that one. The one thing that gets me a little bit of like, there's some intrigue to this conversation is the fact that there's a lot of intrigue, or at least some kind of interest around the league in Brett Rippon, just because he has the ability, the smarts and the football IQ to come in and step in and at least be able to manage a game for you. We saw that with him playing against the New York Jets a couple years ago. It may not be the best performance. He obviously doesn't have the arm strength and stuff like that you need, but he can at least come in and right the ship and at least raise the floor of your quarterback room just a little bit. That's the guy that really intrigues me the most is, do you want to lose out on a guy like a Brett Rippon who is probably going to be a coach in the NFL in the next 5 years? Like, he doesn't have the talent alone just to play the game, but he understands the game at an entirely unique level. And for that, it's like an incredibly valuable piece to have. And Travis Weber jumping in here. Good evening, Erick, Lance, and Scott. Do you see Sam Martin gone? Let's go into that really fast. Let's go into the Sam Martin conversation before we bounce back to the Brett Rippon, because I want your take on that.
So in the terms of Sam Martin, I mean, the special teams, we can go ahead and just get that conversation out of here because that was the third part of this too. I mean, there's no competition at kicker, Brandon McManus. There's no competition at long snapper, Jacob Bobenmoyer, who had actually a really good year last year. When I went back and watched him before doing my profile on him, I was actually surprised at how good he did. Granted, I'm still learning on how to evaluate long snappers a little bit and, figure out the right techniques and stuff like that. But punter, that's the only specialist section or specialist unit that has that competition going. And for me, Sam Martin, he's fine. He's a little disappointing, but he's expensive. And Corliss Waitman, no idea what he is. Right now I have Corliss Waitman making the roster simply because of the cost. But until we see them in preseason, who knows? It's still Sam Martin's job to lose. And Corliss Waitman will have to go and show that it's not such a huge loss at the punter position going from Martin to him to where the cost of Martin is, worth paying for the difference. So I have Corliss Waitman at the moment as the punter, but it's still very much up in the air.
The one thing I want to go with here on Sam Martin, first thing, Jody jumping in saying, I want his salary gone. I'm there with you on that one. I think that you should go as cheap as you can for the ability that the player has. And especially at the punter position, specialists, kickers are one thing, punters are another. Like if you have an elite kicker like a Brandon McManus, you pay the guy, keep him in, because kickers are incredibly valuable. Like more often than not, the kicker is the team leader in points. Like Jason Elam still leads this team in points because of his ability to kick field goals and extra points. He accounts for the most points of any player on the roster. And there's no debate about that every single season. I mean, unless you have a guy that scores like a 22 rushing touchdowns, like a LaDainian Tomlinson or something like that, however many years ago, your kicker is usually going to lead you in points. So having a guy that can actually do that at a reliable level, you need to have a quality guy. And when you have one, you pay him. As far as a punter goes, the ability to flip the field, pin some teams back and whatnot, situational punting and stuff is great to have, but you don't need to spend what I don't know if Sam Martin's contract off the top of my head, but it's more than $2.5 million, I think. So I also have a qualm here because I thought Sam Martin was actually fairly decent over the last season. He was very good at directional punting, did a great job of keeping the ball out of the end zone. Granted, he had a lot of long fields to punt into, but he did a great job of flipping the field and putting the defense in an advantageous, situation. To me, I understand wanting to trim the cost down a little bit, Corliss Waitman has a long way to go to prove that he is better than Sam Martin, who's been a quality NFL punter for a long time in the NFL.
Well, the issue with that is kind of what you touched on it, and that is Sam Martin did well because they had the elongated fields to kick from. Mm-hmm. When it got shorter, he struggled. Right, he struggled to keep it from bouncing into the end zone. He struggled with the proper placement of it on those those corner coffin kick kind of things. So Corliss Waitman, he's going to have to show that maybe he doesn't have as strong of that straight leg as Martin does, because there's no denying that Martin can boom it. Can Whitman be a little bit better with the placement, keeping it out there, because they're going to be dealing with shorter fields more often. Now, going back to the quarterback conversation, because there's only so much we want to spend on special teams. The backup job is, I know there's a lot of fans of Brett Rippon, but the thing is that he's just not that good. Right. His one start wasn't that good. He threw 70 interceptions in that single game. KB82 says with $1.99 says, I hope I pick Rip. He's Simeon with a higher football IQ. I disagree. There's no doubt that Brett Rippon has a high football IQ, but Simeon was brilliant. Like he was really smart. There was constant praise for that. And so it's hard to say without sitting down and talking to them. I'm not really sure which ones, but there's a reason why Simeon is still lasting around with it. And he started multiple games, and as bad as he was as a starter, he still showed to be more capable out there on the field than Brett Rippon has. Though, again, more limited sample size there. But Rippon, when he came into the game last year, I can't remember what game it was off the top of my head. They completely went away from passing because he was just a liability to them. I like Rippon. I like the smarts that he brings to it. But, in the style of offense that you're having, he's not one that can really run those bootlegs that you want to run, those play action rollouts. He's not one to attack deep either, because his arm strength is very much a concern. Josh Johnson has plenty of issues, but he can run the offense as is. He's closer to Russell Wilson than that style than Brett Rippon is, to where you don't have to make such a drastic change to your offense when there's a change at quarterback.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm actually looking up Josh Johnson right now as we speak, because he's been on, 15 different NFL franchises. He's also bounced around between the XFL. He was in the USFL, I believe, there as well. He's just been all over the place, because while he has a lot of tools, there's a lot of tools to work with the guy. He has a fairly decent arm. He moves around fairly decently. But he's also old. Like I said, he's been with 15 NFL franchises. I think he's 34, 35 years old. He fits at least just with what he just turned 36. So thank you. Yeah. But when he steps onto the football field, he's relatively effective. Look at what happened with the New York Jets just this last season. Zach Wilson was dinged up. Mike Mike White, I think, is the backup quarterback's name that came and stepped up, that had that great game. But then they bring in Josh Johnson, and he throws for 300 yards in back-to-back weeks, gets traded to the Baltimore Ravens because they wanted another option after Lamar Jackson went down. And they had Tyler Huntley in there as well. But Josh Johnson came in through another 300-yard game for the Baltimore Ravens this last season. So he's got the experience. He has the understanding of how to play quarterback at the NFL level. He may not be the best guy, but in terms like the best player as a backup quarterback in the NFL, honestly, I'd almost rather have Trevor Siemian, to tell you the truth. But in terms of running this offense in what it is, Josh Johnson's the best fit for it. And with the experience that he has, he can come in, help with Russell Wilson, and potentially help with Brett Rippon to help understand the football game even more than he already does. So to me, I think that the conversation doesn't go to where the backup is. It comes to whether you're going to keep Brett Rippon on this roster or even in Denver for this next season. Because quite honestly, you may not get a whole lot for him, but if a quarterback goes down in training camp, that's a valuable trade asset for this Broncos team.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least, barring somebody coming in blowing it away, that Brett Rippon will make the practice squad. I don't think unless he goes out there and absolutely tears it up in the preseason, then I doubt he gets claimed off waivers. And every year, Bronco fans always have this thing of this, third string quarterback looks super, or fourth string quarterback looks super good in preseason, and he's not going to clear waivers, and then come out and find out he clears waivers. I mean, Brett Rippon did that his first year as a rookie. Like nobody thought he would clear waivers, and there he is. And he's just not that good. I mean, nothing against him. I really liked him coming out, and I thought he was worth a draft pick for the right offense. I don't think this offense is the right offense for him. No, because it's going to ask him to use this athleticism a little bit more that he doesn't have. I mean, he is smart, and he can hit those underneath throws, those short, shallow throws. So ideally, with the offense that we saw, being ran last year, those short underneath throws and letting the receivers go make a play, that's what he's built for more, because that is what his arm is capable of. He has to have these wide open windows. He's not one to really, hit those tight window throws. He's not going to really throw it deep. KB came in he had 3 interceptions against the Jets. Yeah, I know the 77 or whatever was hyperbole. And one of the interceptions was a great play by the defense, but so was one of the touchdowns. I mean, we can't ignore that fact either, that he almost threw a fourth one that Jerry Jeudy literally took away from the defense. And I believe there was another almost interception in that game where the defender just dropped it. Just multiple plays like that, because the ball took so long to get there. The defender was able to make a play on it. In the Bucs game, he had 9 passes, completing 8 of them, which is great, but a lot of them were shorter and shallow. Shallow passes. I mean, he averaged only not even 6 yards per attempt that game, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So it's this thing of like, who are you going to trust more in this new offense? Because Josh Johnson, he's got more tools that fit the offense better, and he's pretty smart guy. I mean, there's a reason like he keeps bouncing around. The NFL teams keep wanting him in the NFL on their team for a reason. He's got some decent tools. I mean, he's not a great quarterback. He's not a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Neither is Brett Rippon. He's got some smarts. He's got some tools. So again, it's like, that's your guy at the backup job. And that seems to be the case with everything that came out of OTAs and everything so far, is that it would seem to be very clearly Wilson, then Johnson, then Rippon. And yeah, the debate is 2 or 3 quarterbacks, which is what I said. And I think that in this case, it is going to be only 2 quarterbacks, with Rippon brought back on the
practice squad.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe that this is Rippon's last year of eligibility on the practice squad. So this is
because of the changes on it. There's only a limited amount of spots on it for it, but you don't have to have that under 3 years of accrued seasons to be on it. Or I think 2 spots.
Right. I
have two people that are longtime veterans.
Yeah, I don't remember the full breakdown of all the rules and whatnot off the top of my head, but I know that he is pushing towards the end of the practice squad. I think I'm probably completely wrong on that, so correct me if that is needed. I want to jump into this question here from Mike S, because this is relevant to the quarterback conversation. Obviously, we saw Kyler Murray sign. It was a 5-year, $230.5 million extension. I think it's $46.5 million on an average per year basis, with 105 total and full guaranteed, up to 160 in guaranteed money based on incentives and stuff like that. That are, a lot of them are likely to be earned based on rushing. I think there was some passing yardage and stuff like that. But Mike comes in and he asked a very good question here. Is Russell Wilson the next big name quarterback to get an extension? And there's 3 guys right now that are knocking on the door of that conversation. You've got obviously Lamar Jackson over in Baltimore, and then the 2 young studs. One of them was just playing in the Super Bowl, and Joe Burrow, and then Justin Herbert, our next door neighbor over in Los Angeles for the Chargers. There's 3 obviously big name quarterbacks that are right up for extensions this year. Does Wilson get done before those guys?
I mean, I think he gets done before Herbert and Burrow. They are not eligible for an extension until after this season.
Right.
So I think he gets done before them. I'm not sure on Lamar Jackson. It sounds like I can't remember who it was. Somebody tweeted out just a comment yesterday or the day before. Whenever Kyler Murray's contract came out. Was that yesterday that he was?
Yes, that was yesterday.
So not long after that, one of the, big stream media guys in Denver made a tweet that kind of hinted at a extension looming for Russell Wilson here soon. I think before the season's done, we have an extension. If not, out there in the news, that it's agreed upon. And so I'm not sure if he's the next big name, but he'll definitely be one of the next big names. And just address this real quick. KB talking about Josh Johnson. There's also a reason he's out of the league for multiple years at a time. Technically, he hasn't been out of the league at all. He's been on the team at least for the offseason and for offseason programs every single year.
Yeah.
Going back to 2008. I mean, there's been a lot of times where it was just the offseason programs aspect of it, but he's never actually been out of the league for a year. So,
at least not for a full season. And I let me refresh the page here, and I'll get back to that. I want to jump back to the Kyler Murray thing. As far as where Russell Wilson's at, obviously he's a much better quarterback than Lamar Jackson. He's a much better quarterback than Kyler Murray even. There's a good debate, if you want to have it, about Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, just based on the fact that, I mean, those guys are young. They're playing at an incredibly high level for where they're at. Russell Wilson's at 33 right now. He had the injury last season. The first time he's ever missed games in his NFL career was last year. But at the same time, Russell Wilson's a top 10 easy quarterback, and he's not number 10. He's probably closer to the top 7 than number 10. But with Kyler getting that extension that he got, and obviously the next guy up, Deshaun Watson, and his deal, which is a monstrosity, to be honest. We're not going to get into that. But Kyler Murray getting a little bit more than Deshaun Watson with less guarantees. Where does Russell Wilson line up here? Like the speculation I've been hearing for a while now is that because of Russell Wilson and his ability as that top 7 quarterback in the NFL, is 5 years and $250 million fully guaranteed out of the realm of possibility? And there's a wild card in this as well. Eric, I want your answer first, and I'll present the wild card here in a second.
Sorry, what was the question?
Is 5 years and $250 million fully guaranteed for Russell Wilson on the horizon here? He's better than Kyler. He's better than Deshaun. Like that would reset the quarterback market in a new way.
Well, I mean, I think that the conversation was after, Watson got that crappy deal. Well, morally corrupt deal from the Browns, I guess it would be the better way to put it. A lot of people are speculating that all these quarterbacks are going to go after these full guaranteed deals. Teams aren't going into it. I mean, we saw that with Kyler Murray. I don't think that we'll see that with Russell Wilson. I think we'll continue to see a higher percentage of guaranteed money, but I don't think we'll see another one that's fully guaranteed.
Well, the wild card that I want to present to you in this is Russell Wilson's agent. So Russell Wilson's agent is Mark Rogers. As everybody should famously know now, Russell Wilson was a baseball player as well. He was a highly drafted baseball player, in fact, by the Colorado Rockies. His agent is Mark Rogers, who only has one NFL client, and that's Russell Wilson. they deal in fully guaranteed contracts. They're very stingy and they're very strict on what they want with their players at the baseball level. They know that they can get this guaranteed money. So does that factor play a little bit more into this conversation with Mark Rodgers potentially wanting to get, I mean, Russell Wilson, like I said, is a better quarterback than Lamar. He's a better quarterback than Kyler Murray. He may be better than Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert as well. Depending on who you ask, I mean, there's a conversation to have there. Mark Rodgers has a legitimate claim here to say that my client deserves a fully guaranteed contract because the atrocity of what Deshaun Watson's was. Like, does that factor into this in your opinion?
What, the fact that he's a baseball agent, where the whole salary cap's not a thing in baseball, right? I don't know how it is. Like, it's basically you can go pay whatever you want. You consistently see $500 million deals. Like, no, I don't think that's a factor because it's a completely different sport, and right. He knows this because he's already dealt had to handle multiple negotiations over contracts in the NFL. I don't think it plays a factor. I think that if anything, again, he's going to ask for a little bit more higher percentage guaranteed than what roughly the average has been. But I don't think he's going to go after a full one, and I don't think it'd be smart for him to try to, unless Denver was more than willing and Denver approached that subject, and him walking up to him and being like, well, in baseball, we deal with this, so you guys should too. He'd just be laughed at. And I just think that would be, bad business from the agent.
I understand your point here. It was just something that I've heard as a talking point, so I wanted your opinion on that. I don't think it necessarily factors in very much as well, just in my personal opinion. But at the same time, I think that he could potentially push for more guaranteed years. So with a guy like Russell Wilson, who we all know is a high quality quarterback, say he gets a 5-year, let's call it 235, 5 years and 235. Why not see if you can't guarantee the first 4 years of that, give him $200 million guaranteed. That's a big jump over what Kyler just got in terms of the likely to be earned guarantees. Like Kyler got 160 or something like that, I think is what it shapes up to be. So would Russell Wilson get that fourth year of his deal guaranteed to be 38, 39 years old potentially at that particular point? So $200 million guaranteed. I don't think that that's necessarily far-fetched.
Well, I mean, it's just, we're saying the same thing just differently. You're talking about in years. Right. I'm just talking about just overall percentage of it. Right. That extra percentage could be in that fourth year.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying on that. And again, it's a great conversation to have. Travis Weber jumping in here. I actually want to know who is going to be the right side of the offensive line. Well, I can tell you one of those guys, and actually Jody Moncrief jumping in right behind that, Quinn Miners and Billy Turner. That's probably the way it's going to shake out, at least in my opinion. I think Quinn Miners is penciled in right now as the starter at the right guard position. He played well enough this last year, and the profile of his prospect profile at Wisconsin Whitewater, the athleticism and stuff that he has, and just the play that he had last season as a rookie leads me to believe that Quinn Miners is going to be the guy at the right guard position unless something drastic happens. Billy Turner is probably the more fun conversation to have because it really is going to be a three-way conversation with Billy Turner, Tom Compton, and then Calvin Anderson, who the team still continues to be relatively high on from what I understand. Eric, do you have any qualms with that?
Well, I think we can go away from, Quinn Miners being penciled in at right guard to he's just in Sharpie.
Okay.
As for right tackle, it's sounding like that it's leaning towards at the moment Calvin Anderson.
Really?
With
okay.
Billy Turner and Tom Compton, being there for the backup and also being in contention for the left guard spot, which we've talked about on here a lot. And a lot will depend on what happened with Dalton Reisner. They tried trading him during the draft. They didn't really have takers at the time. We'll see what happens for it. And apparently we'll found out early because the offense coordinator, Justin Outen, wants to find out who the starting lineup's going to be within the first week of training camp. We'll see if that actually happens because, I mean, it'd be great to have that happen. But it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how things play out at right tackle because I think that right tackle will also play an impact on what they do at left guard. Mm-hmm. I don't think Moody's going to be there for the starting job. I think that he's kind of clearly there for a backup spot. And if Anderson does take it and Billy Turner is still up for grabs, then maybe that can put them, more towards trading away Dalton Reisner. If Billy Turner wins it, maybe they want to keep Dalton Reisner a little bit more. who rebounded last year when Pat Shurmur started switching more to an outside zone based scheme, and Reisner improved. So it's an interesting conversation, and I think that, as I said, that wanting to find out your starting five when you have so many question marks in the first week is concerning. But at the same time, I mean, it's a reason why you want to hope for. And real quick, Jody says, I very much disagree. Moody is your starting left guard. Based on what? Based off of some practices where there's no pads and limited contact for the block for the offensive line. I mean, like, until I see it, I'm going to take, those practice reports with no pads on with a grain of salt. Like, Moody's been impressive, but every conversation I've had is that with people within the organization, with people close to the organization, is that Moody is not, he's not there for the starting job, and he seems to be there for the backup.
I want to bounce this off of you, and I might be wrong on Dalton Reisner, but I know for a fact Graham Glasgow hasn't been practicing in OTAs. I think Reisner has missed some time as he's bouncing back from something that he's got going on. So Moody had the opportunity, like the advantage of an opportunity to go out and show himself. I think that's where a lot of the hype is coming from. And you hear it all the time. It's a kind of a coach speak argument for the most part with Netani Moody right now. They're dangling somebody. Somebody is out there, and it's like the carrot and the stick argument, and they've got a carrot right now, and they are trying to lead the NFL into understanding they've got a guy that they're willing to move on from because of the investments that they did make in the offensive line. And Eric, it goes back to your point here as far as the right tackle conversation is concerned with Calvin Anderson, because if Calvin Anderson does win that right tackle job, you might have a potential long-term answer here. I think he's on it's a 1-year deal. I think, is he still exclusive rights free agent? I'm forgetting myself here. Regardless, if Calvin Anderson wins that job, then you now have Billy Turner and Tom Compton, who you've brought in, that can play the tackle position and you can play the guard position. You've got Graham Glasgow that can play, and there's a question here about Graham Glasgow being a swing. He can play both guard positions, and he can also play center for you. And you also have Quinn Miners here. So one of Netani Moody and Dalton Reisner is a valuable trade asset for a guy that can play on both sides of the offensive line. They're very, very good players at the guard position in relative terms and stuff like that. So one of those two guys is a piece that you're going to dangle out there on the trade wire to see if you can't recoup some draft capital that you lost from the Russell Wilson trade. So to me, I think that's a very valuable conversation to have.
And real quick, before we move on to running backs, the other part of this conversation, Jody says Reisner, because he has sucked the last 2 years. He did 2020 was a really bad year for him. 2020 really started off bad, but towards the end of the season, I mean, he improved. And Netani Moody, whenever he's taken the field, has been far worse. I mean, he had a solid showing as a run blocker in his first game against Carolina Panthers. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you can put on the tape and you can watch him in pass protection, and it was terrible. I mean, and then in the Las Vegas Raiders absolutely ate him up in the second game that year. Then last year, the Baltimore Ravens game, like, if you want to, like, man, that was bad from Moody. Yeah. So, I mean, like, if we're just basing it off of what they've done already, I mean, neither one of them is really a great answer. But one of them, Reisner, has shown he can handle this kind of scheme, as he did in a rookie, and showed when Pat Shurmur, started changing up the running game offense last year, showed that he can still handle it. Being an inside zone scheme was not a fit for Reisner like it was for Moody. Mm-hmm. And also, too, is like talking about OTAs and minicamp, Netani Moody got a lot of got a praise for it. But one who also did was Dalton Reisner. I mean, there were multiple times Nathaniel Hackett also raved about what Dalton Reisner was doing in a limited basis because he was still working back from an injury, that he wasn't fully go every single time until Moody got to step in. But I believe Tom Compton also got some time there at left guard. Mm-hmm. Billy Turner hasn't been able to practice. So, like, there's been multiple moving pieces there at left guard. And as you said, the trade bait, who's it going to be? There's a potential that it's Compton. There's potential that it's Moody. It's potential that it's Reisner. I mean, Reisner is the one that they were actively looking at trading during the draft. And that's probably the one that they can probably get the most for out of it, because there's a lot more with Reisner too that could potentially be on his way out. It's a lot more than play. So we'll see how that happens. We'll see how things change over the coming weeks, because being at training camp, it'll be a chance for these new coaches to kind of answer those other questions.
Right.
And KB82 came in with $1.09 and says, what's the chance that any Uwazurike takes Ajim's spot? Well, for me right now, I have Uwazurike starting as the third defensive lineman. I think Ajim makes the roster as well.
Whoa, slow down for a second here. You have Uwazurike starting?
Yes.
As a third defensive lineman.
Yep.
Okay, so let's run this down really fast. You've got obviously Draymond Jones. You're going to get DJ Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So you think he's going to start as like a 4-eye?
Yes, as I have said consistently over the months.
I thought you would go more like a Deshaun Williams, maybe.
No. I think you and I disagree on Uwazurike. You think that he's more on the inside, up to that 2-eye. I think he can be that 4-eye technique that we saw from Ashawn Robinson. Deshaun Williams, I think he can play out to that 3, sometimes 4-eye, but he's better in that 0 to 2-eye technique. McTelvin Ajim, I think right now is a passer specialist. Until I see otherwise with him against the run, I don't want him starting. Matt Henningsen is dealing with injuries and stuff like that, and so I haven't seen enough there for that. I mean, I haven't seen really much of Uwazurike either,
right.
But of the role that they seem to be looking for, he's the best one that fits.
Right.
I know it's a bit of a bold take, I guess, because of him being a rookie, but I think a lot of us are accustomed to Vic Fangio not liking to play rookies right away, unless absolutely necessary. I don't think that's going to be the case with this coaching staff. And I think that if he goes out there and wins it, then it is a Uwazurike spot. Right now, I have it, but I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a battle at the position still.
Well, no, and don't get me wrong. I'm fully here for the discussion of Uwazurike playing 4-eye. Don't get me wrong. I loved him. I loved him as a 3 tech. I thought that was a great role for him. I thought as a 2-eye, he would probably be. That's where he would be his best, because he can take advantage of slower centers off the snap. But I'm here for him as a 4-eye. I'm here. Watching him at Iowa State and his ability to jump from the 0 all the way out. He played it as a 7 technique defensive end. This guy is incredibly athletic. He's fluid. He moves so well. I love that. I'm just kind of surprised that you went with him as your starter as the third defensive lineman. To me, that's spicy. I'm here for it though. I like this take. I like your thinking behind this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that I'm looking at what they seem to be looking for on the defensive line,
right?
Who fits. It matters. And Jody says, when you're in 4-2-5, who cares about the 3DL? Well, it's just semantics. 4-2-5. I'll keep saying this. I'll keep pounding it. You have your defensive lineman, you have your edges, you have your linebacker, the old 3-4, 4-3, 4-2-5, all that. It's just outdated.
Yeah.
That kind of lingo just needs to, outside of very basic generic stuff, it's not worth it.
Well,
Denver will likely run a lot of 2 defensive linemen, 2 edges, 1 linebacker. That'll be a lot of what they run. There'll be a lot of 3 down linemen, 2 edges, 2 linebackers. They're going to mix it up. Right. I think their base will be somewhere that is somewhat resembles a 3-4 for the generic term, but 2 of those linebackers are going to be edges. So it's really going to be 5 men on the trench, 2 in linebackers. So.
I guess I wanted to go back to this a little bit, and I understand where you're coming from as far as getting Uwazurike on the field and whatnot with as far as that third defensive lineman, hand down defensive lineman. Where would you put him if they go for a true 2 down lineman, 2 edge defenders, that 4-2-5 look? Would he be that first substitute on the field in that sub package, or do you think that he could actually, because of his versatility on the offensive line or the defensive line, being able to play all the way from 0 to 7, do you think that he's going to line up as that 3 technique opposite of Draymond and a 4-eye? Is that something you could do? And Phil McLaughlin jumping in here with a quick stars donation. We appreciate you, Phil, for doing that. And thank you for joining us on the show. But Uwazurike and Draymond Jones, I'm here for this tandem. I'm so, because the length, the physicality, the burst, the ability to get after the passer, splitting guards and centers, getting between guards and tackles. Do you think that Uwazurike may line up as that 4 eye to Draymond Jones at a 3, or maybe reverse those roles a little bit as far as seeing those two players on the field the majority of the time for the defensive line at a 4-2-5 alignment?
Well, I think if you're going with that 2 down lineman look, I think that it's going to be Jones and Jones more so than
Okay.
Uwazurike, because Jones does have that. I don't like him, farther out, but that 3 technique, that 2 technique, like I like him there. And then he still offers that run defense that you're not caught looking. And then you have Draymond Jones with the pass rusher ability, and then you can add in a little bit more, edges. You can get more creative with your pass rush looks.
Right.
But in 2 down looks with Uwazurike and Draymond Jones, I would expect, kind of a similar thing. Uwazurike, because he's got a little bit more strength to handle the run defense aspect of it. He can be that 2-eye 3, that 2 technique. Whereas Draymond Jones, I think he's going to be pretty consistently as that 5 technique, 4 technique kind of guy.
And that's a fair evaluation of the situation. I'm learning so much this year because I'm really trying to focus more on defensive alignment in football. I'm going to get started a lot earlier this year on my draft preparation and stuff like that. I'm really making a conscientious effort of trying to just get better at my analysis after some criticism for me over the last couple of weeks has kind of arisen. So I love hearing more of the way that you look at football and stuff. So I really appreciate this conversation. Travis Weber jumping in here saying, I know that this is a contract year for Bradley Chubb, but I can see him being shopped if Baron Browning shines at the edge. I don't know about being shopped, because while Bradley Chubb has really failed to live up to his expectation as the number 5 overall pick back in 2018, I'm here for that conversation. There's still an incredible value for a player like him. He's been nicked up. He tore his ACL. He had the bone spurs in both ankles this last season, and he just hasn't really seen the field. But when he's healthy, he plays as a top probably 12, I would say, edge defender in the NFL. Go back to his rookie season. He had 12 and a half sacks or something like that. And then the year he had after the torn ACL, his third season, he was number 7 in total pressures on the quarterback. I think he had 7.5 sacks as well to go along with that. To me, there's still a lot of value for a guy that you have like a Bradley Chubb, because teams have to respect that. And when he's healthy, he plays at an incredibly, incredibly high level. To shop him right now, I think, is a bad move. I think it would be more prudent to just let him play out this season and go into the offseason and find out if he plays very well this year. You still have the franchise tag. You can slap him with the franchise tag, make him prove it again, and then work into a conversation about re-signing him. I also have a lot of reservations about Bradley Chubb, because I don't know that that's going to happen. If he does play at a high level, you can slap the franchise tag on him. He's going to ask for a whole bunch of money. You're going to see him walk after next year anyways. If he doesn't play at a high level, you're not going to get any trade value for a guy that's always injured and doesn't play at a high level. That's just the basic facts of the life in the NFL. So to me, I don't do anything with Chubb until after this season's over. Eric, what do you think?
I don't think anything will happen with Chubb during the season. Based off of what has been said by both Nathaniel Hackett and George Payton, they want to see them out there on the field. They want to see all this other stuff for it. Real quick, Jody says you can't trade Chubb knowing Gregory might start on PUP. Doesn't sound like he'll start on PUP. Like, it doesn't. It sounds like he'll be.
Question: Where did you hear that? Is that conversations you've had, or did you see a report on that? Because I haven't seen any reporting on that.
It's just reading Mike Kliss's initial report on it. It sounds like that he's going to be part of practices and everything. He just won't play in any preseason games. They're just going to take it easy before first week of the game, before game 1.
Gotcha.
So it just doesn't sound like it's he's not still injured to where he's going to start on the PUP. It's that he can go. They just want to give him a little bit extra time with some limitations in training camp and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
Not giving him full time. But anyways, going back to the rest of it with Bradley Chubb, if it's a disappointing season, if Denver's has 2 wins, 3 wins by the time the trade deadline is, maybe they shop Chubb then. but he'll take something disappointing. I think at the very least he'll make it through the season. They'll discuss what they want to do, and I wouldn't be surprised if they decide they want to move on, if they still place a franchise tag on him and then try to trade him off that or from that,
I can
is
see
a possibility. But I think that if he does well enough, I think that it's going to be a thing of they want to keep him. That seems to be what it is.
It depends on the cost value on that one, and I really want to see it. Like I said, I want to wait until after the season to see what actually happens here. If he plays at a high level, I'm all for the franchise tag. At least do that. Keep him around at least for this next season, 2023. But it has to be double-digit sacks, high productivity. A fully healthy season would definitely help with that. But I'm not giving him $16 million a season for him to go out and not play at a relatively high level, at least push for double-digit sacks. I'm thinking 10 sacks at least would be the point where I would be willing to do something like that. Because if nothing else, and hear me out on this one, if nothing else, someone's going to overvalue the fact that he was the former number 5 overall pick that has a pedigree of being an elite pass rusher. At least at some point, someone's going to take a flyer on him, and you're going to get a compensatory pick for him regardless. It may not be a 3 because he's not going to demand that high value contract unless he has a big season. $16 million, I can understand where you would be enticed by that. And I don't know what the going market is right now, but you're going to have to show me a lot to be able for me to have that. I would rather take the draft pick, rebuild the roster, and move forward. If that's where it came down to. If you're not giving me 10 sacks this year, I would move forward in a different direction.
Well, I mean, of course, production matters, cost matters, and everything. Because I wouldn't, if he gets hurt again, I wouldn't Randy Gregory him, where we don't get to see him on the field for there and still give him $14 million a year. Yeah. I wouldn't do that. We already took the risk with that once. Mm-hmm. So of course, there's other aspects to it. I mean, depending on what he gets, for me, I always look at the pressures more than sacks. Really, I mean, for me, it's a little bit more valuable. Sacks are huge, but pressures are great in their own way. So it depends on all that, of course, and depending on what it does, or depending on how he does, it could be. And Jody says, Eric, if you trade Chubb today, what do you get for him? 5 at best. With how pass rushers are, I could see some team being desperate enough to throw maybe a 4th and another pick, if not a 3rd, his way. I mean, just because of the fact that pass rushers are so valuable. Yep. He's still relatively cheap for this year. Yes, there's a lot of risk to it, but teams have shown that they're a little bit willing to do that. They're a little bit willing to take that risk. Yep. But I just don't think that Denver will listen to it. I mean, really, I don't think that. Well, I don't think they're open to trading him because it seems to be very concrete that Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory are going to be the starters.
Yep. Just quickly here, I want to first off, Phil jumping in with another generous stars donation, and thank you, Phil, again for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your support. We all do here at Mile High Huddle, and again, thank you for that. I want to give a quick shout out to D Money, who threw this comment in here just a little bit ago. Finally caught one live. Big smiles all the way around, and thank you, D Money, for coming in and joining us. We appreciate you here. There was a question you had a little bit later than that, and I can't find that for some reason. Apologies, but thank you, D Money, for joining in here. The other aspect of this conversation, going back to Bradley Chubb, and as far as him being traded, at least in this season, is the fact that the edge depth for this team is a massive, massive question mark. I mean, Malik Reed, we kind of know what he is, and that's not it, guys. He's not it as far as a full-time starter in this league. You've got Jonathan Cooper, who played fairly well, at least down the stretch of the last season. But then, I mean, Nick Bonito is another guy there that obviously is second-round draft pick from this last NFL draft. There's a big question mark of who is the guy to step up and be a starter. Bradley Chubb, at least you know that when he's healthy, he has a high potential of being a high-quality player in the NFL. You know Jonathan Cooper isn't it, at least right now. You know Malik Reed isn't it, at least right now. And you have no idea with Nick Bonito. Why are you moving on from at least your second-best pass rusher, if not your first-best pass rusher, throughout the season, unless somebody shows up and shows that they have the ability to play at that full-time starter capability? And the only one that you can say that for right now, based on what we've seen, is Nick Bonito. like we haven't seen him on the field. He's going to have to come out and show an incredibly high level of play to dethrone Bradley Chubb to begin with. So this conversation to me is at least a moot point. I understand where it's coming from, but I don't think that there's any basis in reality. And I apologize for coming at you like that.
I was going to disagree with one thing he said.
Okay.
Is that we don't know what Malik Reed is at this point? No, we do know what Malik Reed is at this point.
Right. So I misspoke. I misspoke on that. We do know what Malik Reed is at this point.
That's the only disagreement I have. We know he ain't it. We know he's not starter quality despite his experience. We know at best he should be the fourth string edge defender. But moving on to running backs to finish this out.
Yeah.
For me, it's a similar conversation as the quarterback one. It's not so much the starters or even the second guy. We know it's going to be Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. We know those are your top two guys. Mike Boone seems to be poised for that third spot. There's a slight competition from Crockett and McAllister. But my bigger question is, do they keep four? And I'm not counting fullbacks on here because fullback for me, it's tight ends. You're going to rotate them over. You're going to sub them out. That's what Green Bay did a lot. Like that's just becoming the trend of it. Fullbacks are starting to make a little bit of a rise, but it's for very certain schemes, and it doesn't seem to be what Hackett's bringing over. Otherwise, we would have a full-time fullback.
Right.
So for me, it's that's the conversation is three actually Boone, and is there a fourth one kept?
I think Boone has that one locked up based on, let's pause for a second because we got a big off the top rope super chat here from Anthony Edwards throwing down $20. And Anthony, thank you for your support, man. We really appreciate that. What do you two think of Tom Compton starting at left guard? I know we want to see Reisner succeed, but isn't Tom Compton a better run blocker? And Reisner was not great at pass pro last year. Thanks for the hard work you guys put in, and go Broncos. And Anthony, thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. If I remember correctly, Tom Compton, when he was playing right tackle for the San Francisco 49ers, was graded as, I think he was the top graded run blocking right tackle in the NFL, or up at the top. What, Eric, you're second best. Go ahead. I think you have an argument here. I really do. I think that the argument is between Compton and Reisner at left guard, unless Billy Turner gets inserted into the conversation, which is very well possible. Go back just a little bit into the show. Come back and watch this again. We kind of broke this down a little bit about a half an hour ago or something like that. Eric, do you have anything to add on this really fast?
Compton has always been consistently worse on the left side than he has on the right side, and that includes that guard. He's a great run blocker, but he was still always better on the right side. He was the second best run blocking offensive tackle last year behind his teammate Trent Williams. And for me, Dalton Reisner last year, I mean, he allowed 4 sacks. 2 of them were 100% on the quarterback, running into the guy who was engaged with Dalton Reisner. But Dalton Reisner last year and the year before had good years in pass protection. It was the running aspect of it. He didn't fit the running scheme of it. Dalton Reisner was good as a pass blocker last year, pretty consistently throughout. His improvement came towards the end of the season as a run blocker when they changed up the scheme a little bit. So I think there's a chance for Compton. I think that he is part of that conversation there. I just think that Billy Turner and maybe Graham Glasgow a little bit more so, depending on what they do with Glasgow. I mean, if he ends up taking that starting center job, then obviously not. But Compton, based off conversations, based off of my watching them, based off of just my assumptions as well here, is that Tom Compton was just brought in to bring additional depth at 4 positions. And on this, Jody, again, with his, he's moved on from the left tackle to the left guard, Jody. Like next year, is it going to be going to center? We can prepare for that. Jody comes to saying right back a lot, not in pass protection and not really on the running game either. It was just the fact that he couldn't keep up or stay strong at the point of attack in the running game, and he was just able to get blown by. He wasn't on his back a lot.
Well, I want to go ahead.
We got the running back position before we get out of here.
Okay. So I want to, where I left off here was as far as Mike Boone is concerned. I think that he is probably the guy that you're going to look at as the number 3 running back. This is George Payton's guy. He was George Payton's guy back in Minnesota when he was the assistant GM to Rick Spielman back a few years ago. And Mike Boone, when he's on the field, is actually a high-quality running back. He played really well against Kansas City. The problem is last year we didn't get to see him actually play because he was hurt the vast majority of the year. He tore his quad muscle in, ironically, the preseason practices against the Minnesota Vikings. He missed a lot of time. Demaria Crockett, I think there's some value to have a player like him because he's just a tough runner. That dude puts his head down and he just goes north and south. There's no debate about his ability as a runner because, again, he's just so tough. He runs so hard. He's hard to take down. He bounces off of tacklers a lot. The problem is he's terrible in pass protection, and he's not a receiver by any stretch of the imagination. If you're going to see a fourth running back on this team, you also want to see somebody in special teams play. And while Mike Boone, I think he's a fantastic special teams player. We already know that. In fact, he's brought in potentially as a kick returner, like kickoff returner for this team. So Mike Boone has that spot secured. To me, if you're going to see a fourth running back, they better play special teams, and they better play special teams at a high level. And Eric, I'm going to defer to you on this conversation because I don't know what Demaria Crockett is capable of on special teams.
I mean, that's going to be key here. And Scott makes the point of that Mike Boone has only 75 carries. And it does. I mean, he does seem to have, in Bronco fans, he seems to have taken this higher status than what he's really earned up to this point in his career.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's an explosive running back, but he just hasn't – the opportunities haven't been there, and they haven't been there for a reason. I like him in this scheme that's going to try to get him in space a little bit more often. The few times he got those carries – well in Minnesota, I mean, he did well with them. But it's for me, that third and fourth running back spot is a lot of what do you bring on special teams. Mike Boone, I think he brings a decent amount as a returner with the skill set that he has. And then I think that Crockett also brings a decent amount as a gunner type. But I don't think that they keep four running backs because of this, because this is an offense that can be pretty easy and beneficial for any kind of running back. And it's a position that is really easy to bring into the NFL. I mean, bring up off the street, you can go out there and you can have pretty standard or pretty consistently a pretty solid game. So I don't think they keep three, and I think Mike Boone keep four, and I think that Mike Boone is that third one. McAllister. He had a really good training camp, but that is a situation where it's going to benefit him because no pads are on, limited contact, and he's a speed search type. He's a guy that's going to make people miss. So when there's no contact, when you got to be careful, pull up. I mean, it's going to benefit him. Crockett's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit of a stronger guy, a stronger running back, and he could be good in certain situations. But I think that with this offense, with what we've seen Hackett is they want more explosive ability.
Right.
And Mike Boone brings that with his skill set more than Crockett does. And real quick, just to touch back on it, because I finally found what I was looking for. Last year in pass block win rate, Dalton Reisner was 10th amongst all NFL guards. So.
Yeah, it was never about pass block, the pass blocking ability of Dalton Reisner. It's always been the run blocking that he's had issues with, and running straight forward and cracking domes is not his style. He played a lot better in the Rich Scangarello scheme. We talked about that last week to get back to our conversation here. So I apologies for that. Scott comes at us in the private chat. And Scott, I'm not calling you out here by any stretch of imagination, but he's like $2 million for a special teams player. Like, no way. I don't view Boone as just that special teams player. I think that there's an opportunity, and Eric kind of touched on it a little bit as far as the explosive ability that Mike Boone brings to this roster. I think that there's something there with his ability to catch the football out of the backfield. He's a fairly decent pass protector as well from what I've seen in the limited times that he's actually been out there to do that. And there's not a whole lot of touches to come for a third running back, especially in this scheme, especially when you have Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. And Eric, you touched on it a little bit ago in terms of him not getting the opportunities. He was behind Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in Minnesota for 3 years, however long he's been in the NFL. Now he's behind another dynamic 1-2 punch. He's just never gotten a full opportunity because of the situation surrounding him. Granted, if you're Kareem, you rise to the top, and you should be able to do that. However, this is a high-quality football player, guys. Like in terms of, forget the running back position, forget just the skill set that it takes to play the position itself. Mike Boone's a football player. Like, that guy likes to hit. He likes to be physical. He likes to go out and go make plays. And every time he's on the field, he takes advantage of that. And he does that. He makes plays every time he's around the football. To me, to get rid of a player like a Mike Boone, regardless of the cost, would be a mistake, because what are we doing here? We're playing football. You want the best football players. And Demario Crockett, I think, is a lesser football player than Mike Boone is.
Okay, so a few things on there. Mike Boone hates contact. I mean, you can watch that with his style. He wants to make people miss. I mean, he's a speedster. I'm going to make you miss. I'm going to run by you. That's his style.
Okay.
He's not, I mean, not that he's not a football player, but he doesn't like to be this physical guy. He's like 200 pounds sopping wet.
Right.
I mean, and then you have Crockett, who is cheaper. And I was wanting to make this point earlier. I got sidetracked, but I'll say it multiple times. Cost does have to play a factor in this, because you do have a contract coming up with Russell Wilson. So you have to cut these extra costs, being able to add more cap this year that you can roll over, help ease that hit and everything like that. Getting rid of Mike Boone brings you more money on the long run.
Right.
And it's this thing of how much better of a football player is he than Crockett? How much more does he have to offer the team than Crockett? And I think on offense, I think his explosive ability offers a little bit more than Crockett does. But I don't think that it's the case on special teams. Mike Boone's play on special teams would be as a returner, where you have Montrell Washington, where you have KJ Hamler, where you have all these other guys. You need more guys to go out there and, be that physical tackler guy.
Right.
And that is more Crockett style. So I do still think that the third spot is Mike Boone's, but I don't think that it's, I don't think that it's 100% set, obviously. And Crockett can definitely go up and ease over it. And going back to the chat real quick, Jody seems to have gone backwards and is now going after running backs, saying, do you see Gordon being a cancer if he starts losing a decent amount of touches to it? The whole aspect of Melvin Gordon being a cancer is super overblown. Every player has different issues with different things at it, and it always happens. And then he sees Gordon getting released midseason. I will 100% guarantee that he does not get released midseason. Either he doesn't make this roster to begin with, or he's there for the season. And I doubt he doesn't make the roster.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one, Eric, because Melvin Gordon, we just saw this play out in the Denver media. I'll get to you, Travis, here in just a second. We just saw this play out with Melvin Gordon in the media, where there was an article written by the Denver Post, of all places, saying that Melvin Gordon, depending on who you talk to, Melvin Gordon is a great asset, but there's also the fact that he's a bad teammate. He went after, came out in the media and is like, I'm going to attack this and say, no, ask any of my former teammates and they will all tell you I'm a great teammate. Do not ever say that about me. The guy wants to work. He wants to get his touches. He doesn't want to take a backseat to anybody. But what do you expect from a professional football player? Their shelf life is limited regardless if he's playing the running back position or not. You don't have a long life in the NFL, period. The average NFL career ends after 2.5 seasons. The fact he's made it 8 years shows the fact that he's a fighter and he wants to play well and he wants to get his opportunities to go. He's not going to take a backseat to anybody. I hate that. I hate that argument so much, and I'm sorry for going on the rant. I do apologize for that, but damn, I hate that. I hate that comment that he's going to be a cancer, because he has never been that ever in his football career, period.
And Gurley's Palmer actually, with the reason, came in and stated the reason flat out why I have Mike Boone as my third running back. He is George Payton's guy.
Yeah.
That plays such a factor into it. That is why that he seems to be there. George Payton seems to believe in him, and I think that will have an impact on it.
Yeah.
Jody says, but has Gordon ever been running back too? Yeah, he was last year. Yes, he lost the starting job to Javonte Williams. They each had 3 carries last year.
It was 203 carries.
Or 203 carries. One for 908 yards, one for 916 or something like that. Sorry.
It was literally an exact 50-50 split. Travis Weber, last one tonight. Let's get out of here before we get any more heated. Sorry, that
you get heated. I'm having fun.
I'm having a lot of fun too. This has been a really good show, by the way. The interaction has been great. And Travis, last one here, guys. Travis Weber jumping in. Great show tonight, guys. And thank you. And sorry for jumping around in the chat. Enjoy your weekend and go Broncos. Yes, absolutely. Eric, do you got anything you want to grab out of the chat before I do the last matters of business here.
I do got to agree with Scott and Alan here about those 19 touches and the way you talk about Mike Boone. You do make it seem like that he's a Hall of Fame caliber player off these few touches that he's had.
Whoa.
You do though. Like I'm not saying that it's intentional or that you think he is. It's just that you really do like fight to like tooth and nail for how good Mike Boone is for 75 total touches in his career.
I understand that, and yes, I get that I maybe be a little bit over the top here, but I'm just not a believer in Demaria Crockett. And it goes back to several reasons you had said. He's an explosive playmaker, and he's a guy that I may have misspoke a little bit about him being like super physical. I liked it on special teams because he does like to go crack heads. He is an elusive playmaker, though. He's a guy he is explosive, and every time that he touches the football, he plays really well. And I go back to the one time that we watched him in a starting role when Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison were both out. It was a late season game for the Minnesota Vikings. He ran for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, the guy has playmaking ability in him. And I don't want to lessen the roster and the overall depth of this roster by moving on from a guy that, he makes a lot of money. And I'm here for this conversation. $2 million or whatever the hell his contract is for this year that's a lot of money for a third running back and a special teams player. But again, it goes back to, you need guys that know how to play football and play football at a high level. And Mike Boone just does that. And I'm not sure that Demaria Crockett has that ability to do so.
And all joking aside about how you make Mike Boone out to be on those 75 touches and everything, he has touches in the NFL. Yes. That is something that Crockett doesn't have outside of
exactly.
Preseason. That is something that McAllister doesn't have at all outside of practices, which we don't count practice. No one talks about practice. Practice is stupid. There's no reason for, anyways. So at least he has that. And from a veteran standpoint, he has that edge over a guy who he's not a rookie, but Crockett just doesn't have that experience. No. Play style is going to matter here a little bit. We're going to find answers to this over the preseason, over training camp. And I am curious to see how much George Paton's voice will go into making the 53-man roster as well, because I think that will play a big factor in some of these battles if he does have a voice.
Well, and I think that Mike Boone is the one that you're really going to have to watch out for on this one. The other one, and we've gone over this back and forth multiple times. We'll go over it again here in a couple of weeks. Michael Ojemudia. Michael Ojemudia is not a guy that George Paton has any ties to. While I think that he is cornerback 4 on this roster, I think that he's played well enough to do that. George Paton went out and drafted Damari Mathis for a reason. He values cornerback play.
Because
he went out and got Bless on
complete ass, and he values cornerbacks.
Well, but still, there's also Bless on Austin that you have to talk about. They went out and brought him in free agency.
How much of that? Moves. So here's my counterpoint. How much of that was George Paton? How much of that is the coaching staff? Because I know for a fact this coaching staff loves Michael Ojemudia.
Right.
Bless on Austin was a thing to help add to the depth of this before they were able to go and draft Damari Mathis in the draft where you have no idea of how you're going to draft. For a general manager who has made it very clear what he feels about taking corners, who was very obvious whenever you looked at what Minnesota did during his time there, about how much value there was there. I don't think it at all is the same situation as Michael Ojemudia as it is with Mike Boone, because there's a huge difference here. The defensive coordinator was a guy who wanted Michael Ojemudia. George Paton has spoken in praise of Michael Ojemudia. He was disappointed he didn't get to see Michael Ojemudia out there on the field last year. He mentioned that a few times. So I don't think that the situation here is the same. I think a better aspect of this is Jonathan Cooper. That's an edge defender who was one of George Paton's guys that he went out there and drafted, who is fighting for a roster spot. How much is George Paton going to be George Paton's guy going to play into that depth spot at edge? Because realistically, you're talking about a 4th cornerback that's not quite a starter, but close enough to a starter on a defense with how much you rotate and move around your corners.
Right.
Your 5th edge is a special teams guy. That's more comparable to Mike Boone.
Right.
Anyways, we got to get out of here.
I'm going to dunk so hard when Ojemudia gets traded. I'm just playing. Anyways, guys.
If he does get traded, then that just speaks to the value that he has, that another team wanted him to where they traded him. So I would still be right.
Oh, dude, no, you're not going to twist this. Absolutely not. After all that I've said about how Michael Ojemudia is the guy to watch out for to move, and you don't you dare.
No. You were saying Michael Jimmy is the guy to watch to get cut, not traded. You were specifying
I did say
or
cut.
a song bossy.
Cut.
Take us out of here. Take us out of here.
All righty, guys. Thank you all for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Got a lot of great comments coming in here. Great show tonight from Michael Ronquillo, Dylan Von Arsh, great conversation. Gary Leeds Palmer, great show, guys, as well. Thank you all again for joining us. It was a great show, a lot of fun. I cannot wait to get into the wide receiver conversation because that one's going to be really fun. Tight ends as well, potentially offensive linemen next week as well. We're going to break this entire 53-man roster over the next 3, maybe 4 weeks, maybe cut her down to 3, something like that. We'll keep you guys all up to date. Guys, the easiest way to do that, follow us on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH, and for Eric at Erick Trickel. And also big shout out to Scott Kennedy behind the scenes, running the 1s and 2s, helping produce the show at Scout Kennedy. Also, guys, at DVDD_pod. That's where you're going to find out how we're going to break down this 53-man roster over the next couple of weeks. At Mile High Huddle, that's the mother account where you guys get breaking news and analysis regarding your Denver Broncos. Also, guys, I know we don't have to read this and whatnot. Please, guys, go to manscaped.com. When you check out, use promo code MHH to get 20% off and free shipping. Like, their products are awesome. We've talked about them a long time here, doing a promo again on Twitter and whatnot. But manscaped.com, great stuff to help you guys looking great from head to toe. Go over there and check that out, guys. And also, while you're at it, please, huddleuppod.com. That's the merch tent. You guys get yourself a hat, get yourself a t-shirt. There's a coffee cup. There's onesies for your kids. There's teddy bears, something for the guys, something for the gals, anything to suit your guys' Mile High Huddle fancy and Denver Broncos fancy, to tell you the truth. Huddleuppod.com, great way to support the show. Help us kind of get out there a little bit more and help, just promote what we do here at Mile High Huddle. Guys, if you're not financially able to do so, there are 3 things that you all can do every single day. It does not matter whether you guys are on any social media platform, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle, please. It helps so much. Helps us get out there in front of as many people as possible, especially if you like the video and you share it. Because without your guys' support, we couldn't do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. Now, Eric, let me catch my breath really fast. But I have to ask you before we get out of here, any last words, dude?
No, I got to get out of here, and I hope everybody enjoys the weekend and stay safe.
Yeah, please, guys, stay out of the heat. It's been a brutal heat wave across pretty much the entire United States for the most part. It's been brutal here, brutal pretty much everywhere. Stay out of the heat, stay hydrated, enjoy your weekend. Please stay safe. And as always, take care. We will see you guys same time, same place next weekend. As always, guys, go Broncos.